There is a street in a small village by the sea. You would not find it on any map worth keeping, where the stone is warm before 9 in the morning and stays warm long after dark. Along that street, one summer, 2 children ran barefoot as though the whole world had been built for exactly that purpose. Her name was Lucia. She had a small dark mark above her left eyebrow that her grandmother said was a kiss from an angel who couldn't quite reach any higher. She laughed with her whole face, and when she smiled, it always lifted a little higher on the left, as though even her happiness had a favourite side. His name was Marco. He had a thin, pale scar through his own left eyebrow. From a fall off a wall he still insisted, at 10, had not been his fault. His smile pulled to the right, faintly crooked, faintly pleased with itself. They were not sweethearts. They were not anything so complicated. They were simply the 2 loudest, fastest, most impossible children on that street, and the street was smaller for containing them. Neither of them thought even once about who they might grow up to be. Why would they? They had a wall to climb, a dog to chase, an entire golden afternoon that seemed, as every child's afternoon does, as though it would never actually end. It did end, of course. It always does. At 20, Marco left. Not out of unhappiness. The village had never given him a single reason to be unhappy. But out of the particular hunger that takes hold of some young men and will not let go until they have seen at least a little of what lies beyond the hills. He went north, then further still. He worked where work could be found, slept where sleep could be found, and wrote home rarely, in the careless way of someone who is certain home will still be there when he's ready for it. Lucia stayed, not because she lacked the same hunger, she had it, if anything, more sharply than he did, but because someone has to keep a place, and she had decided, without quite deciding, that it would be her. She grew into her 20s the way a vine grows into a wall, finding her own shape but never quite letting go of what she'd started from. She worked. She laughed with other people's jokes and made her own. She was, by every account but her own, becoming a rather remarkable young woman. She thought of Marco sometimes. Not constantly, just sometimes. The way you think of weather that has passed, wondering, mildly, if it will come round again. He came back the summer he turned 26. She was sitting exactly where you might imagine, a terrace table above the harbour, a glass of something pale and cold in her hand, a wide straw hat tilted against the last of the afternoon sun. When a shadow fell across the table, and a voice she hadn't heard in 6 years said her name as though no time had passed at all. She looked up. It is worth saying plainly what happened next, because it happens so rarely in life exactly the way it happens in stories, and this, for once, was one of those times. They simply looked at each other, 2 people who had once been children together and understood, both of them in the same instant, that whatever this was, it was not nothing. He sat down. She did not tell him to leave. That was, more or less, the whole of it. They did not fall in love quickly. They were both too old by then for the falling to be careless. But they fell in love properly. The way you build something you intend to still be standing in 50 years, over that whole golden summer and the autumn after it, until neither of them could quite remember what it had felt like to imagine a life without the other one in it. They married the following spring, in the same square where they had once chased the same dog. A life, once you are actually living it, does not announce its own chapters. It simply goes on, one ordinary, extraordinary day after another, until one afternoon you look up from whatever you are doing and realise that 20 years have quietly let themselves out the back door. There were vines by then, and the particular satisfaction of work that rewards patience. There were disagreements, as there are in every marriage worth having, And there was the deeper, steadier thing underneath the disagreements that made them survivable, even sometimes almost funny in hindsight. Marco's hands had roughened. Lucia's laugh had not changed at all, though there were new lines now at the corners of her eyes. Put there, she always insisted, entirely by his fault, and entirely worth it. They did not need to say, any longer, that they loved each other. It had become less a sentence and more a fact of the household, like the sea being outside the window or the bells ringing at noon. By 60, they had become the kind of couple that younger people in the village pointed to, quietly, as proof that it could actually be done. That two people really could grow old together and still, after everything, seem glad of each other's company. Lucia went to market most mornings, not because they needed anything in particular, but because the market was where the village kept its conversation, and she had never once in her life been willing to miss a conversation. Marco went with her sometimes, walking a half step behind, watching her greet everyone by name, thinking, as he had thought in one form or another for over 30 years now, that he had been, on the whole, a remarkably lucky man. Their children, for there were children, 2 of them, grown now and scattered, as children are, to their own lives and their own villages, telephoned on Sundays. Lucia kept every letter. Marco kept every photograph. It was, by any honest measure, a good life. Not a grand one, just good. Which, they had both come to understand, is very much the harder thing to build. There is a particular kind of quiet that settles over a marriage in its old age. Not the quiet of having run out of things to say, but the quiet of no longer needing to say them. They sat most afternoons in the garden. Lucia knitted, though her hands were slower now, and the wool sometimes sat forgotten in her lap for whole minutes, while she simply watched the light move across the wall. Marco whittled, still, out of habit more than purpose. Small, useless shapes he gave away to whichever grandchild happened to be visiting. Neither of them spoke of the years ahead. There is a kindness in that particular silence that younger people rarely understand, the deliberate choosing not to name a thing, so that it may go on a little longer, simply being unnamed. What they did instead was smaller and larger than words. He would reach for her hand without looking. She would let him find it, without looking either. Marco died in his sleep, in the spring, in the same house they had shared for over 60 years, with Lucia's hand in his. It is not this film's place to dwell on grief. Grief, when it is honestly come by, does not need dwelling on. It simply is, the way weather is, and it passes through a house the way weather passes, leaving some things changed and others exactly as they were. Lucia is 90 now. She sits most afternoons in the doorway of the same stone cottage, a headscarf over hair gone fully silver, her hands still busy, out of habit, with wool she no longer really needs to knit. The small mark above her left eyebrow is still there. 80 years have not managed to erase it, any more than they have managed to erase the tilt of her smile, which still, even now, even alone, lifts a little higher on the left. If you ask her, and people do sometimes, the younger ones, curious about a life so much longer than their own, she will tell you that she does not think of it as a life that is over. She thinks of it, she says, as a life that is simply, for the moment, being remembered from a chair in the sun, in no particular hurry, by someone who was there for every single day of it. And somewhere, underneath everything, under the wool and the silence and the 80 years of weather, a girl of 10 is still running barefoot down a warm stone street, exactly as fast as she ever was, laughing exactly as loudly, not yet aware of a single thing that is going to happen to her. Which is, perhaps, as it should be. She has all the time in the world.